Thank you. Good morning. Can we get started? We have the South African Optometric Association this morning. Maybe we should just start with the introductions. I see there are 4 gentlemen.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning. My name is Adila Hassim. I'm the president of the SOA.
Just give me your surname again.
Boloka, national anthem, B-O-L-O-K-A.
All right, thank you. Will you be making the presentation?
Yes.
And the other gentleman?
With the 2 gentlemen.
All right. Yes. Can they introduce themselves, please?
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson. My name is Audience Madulek. I'm the immediate past president of the South African Optometric Association and the chairperson of the private practice portfolio for the organization.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, panel. My name is Harry Rosen. I'm what's referred to as the Consulting Chief Executive Officer for the South African Optometric Association.
All right. So one person will be making the presentation.
No, it's all 3 of us.
All right. So can I just take your oath then? Shall I start with you? We'll move that way.
Sure.
So will you take the oath or the affirmation?
Yes, I will.
Okay. Well, let's go for the oath then. Will you say after me, I and your name?
I, Harry Rosen,
Swear that the evidence that I shall give
swear that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and
nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
If so, raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. Mr. Vabuka, will you also take the oath?
Yes.
All right. Will you say after me, I and your name?
I, Adila Hassim,
Swear that the evidence that I shall give
swear that the evidence that I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
If so, raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. And will you also say after me, I and your name?
I, Audience Maduleke,
Swear that the evidence that I shall give
swear that the evidence that I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
So raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. So, gentlemen, you may decide then how you're going to structure your presentation, and you may decide who will go first.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I am going to start with the broad overview of who we are and present the salient points of our issues. And our consulting CEO, Mr. Rosen, will address some bits of legislative frameworks that deals with our issues. And Audience Madulek, as the private practice chairperson, will be giving some bit of examples in terms of the issues that we will be talking about. Firstly, the SOA would like to thank the opportunity provided, and we are appreciative of that. We view this process as quite very important, and given the unfoldings of the year, as our presentation will come to show later on, we feel that it has come at quite an opportune time for us. In our presentation, we've got just a quick presentation about ourselves, and that we are part of the eye care team that is responsible or deals with the issue of eyesight. We're quite impressed that all the esteemed advocates are having their spectacles on, and it shows that you do care about your eyesight. As we say, it's the most delightful of the senses that we have. The background of the SOA is that we are responsible for the profession of optometry. We were formed back then in 1924. We're an NPC, a non-profit company, and we have both membership in private and public sector, but in the main, a lot of our footprint is in the private sector. There's about 2,600 plus minus practicing optometrists, and of that, we've got about 1,600 in our books. Both others are in good standing and others not quite. We are proud to say, Mr. Chairperson, that The optometry in South Africa is ranked among the finest in the world by the World Council of Optometry. This is just a short summary of what an optometry cadre is. It's an autonomous profession that one has to go through education to achieve, and it confines itself within the regulations as per the Health Professions Act. A definition of optometry, shortly and sweetly, is that is a primary health care practitioner that deals with the eye and the visual system. This is just the definition of optometry as per the WCO. I'll just skip past that. And in our country, in the Republic, optometrists in the main deal with performance of eye examinations, provisions of spectacles, contact lenses, sunglasses, diagnostic procedures that assist in diagnosing certain eye diseases, and as well as the therapeutic aspect of those particular diseases. As we had stated, Mr. Chairperson and the esteemed panel, that we've got both footprint and private sector, however quite deeply entrenched into the private sector, perhaps by design of the profession in the erstwhiles, the past years. But as the SOA, we've got quite a very strong position, because we know that the fact that we're in private sector always opens up to the quite used words of FWA, the fraud, wastage, and abuse. And as an association, we are quite very clear, unambiguous, unapologetic, that we oppose fraud, wastage, and abuse in any form, shape, type, size. We are extremely and exclusively against that. We oppose that, and our members, non-members, everyone in the profession knows that that is the position of the association, that anybody who does fraudulent, wasteful, or abusive tendencies, we will not support them. So we just wanted to make that point very clear, so that tomorrow we are not being accused of trying to entrench FWA.
Can you just tell me, I mean, it seems everyone accepts that fraud is rampant within the profession. What is the view of your association? I mean, is fraud rampant? Or, I mean, if you look at your own presentation, it starts off by accepting the problem that, you know, fraud is a major problem. I mean, what is the actual evidence that fraud is a problem perpetrated by practitioners?
If we're to limit ourselves to optometry, we've got about 2.83 billion in terms of the entire health stake, in terms of claims and so forth. We would not say there is a lot of fraud happening in optometry, but as well, we will not say that there is no fraud happening at all. So we are saying that because we know that.
I'm asking you, see, if you look at your
submission,
yes, in the third page, in, under the heading fraud.
Yes.
You see, you start off by saying it is acknowledged that the incidence of fraud across all healthcare disciplines has reached unacceptable proportions. So you yourselves accept that fraud has become unacceptable, or, I mean, my phrase was rampant. Now you say, no, sorry, it's actually not. I mean, what is the basis for this in your profession?
The basis of this statement is based on the quantification of fraud amount, that it's quite very high. And we are saying in terms of the amount, the billions amount as per BHF, I think it's around 22 billion or so. That is the basis of the statement, to say if there's an estimation of 22 billion in terms of fraud, wastage, and abuse, in our view, that is quite unacceptable. So that is where the basis of the statement comes from, as we extrapolate from the stats that have been shared in terms of fraud. So, but in particular, and insofar as optometry is concerned, we will not say that there is massive, deeply entrenched fraud.
Chair, if I could add, to some extent, the whole FWA space it's so because of at times administrative errors in the form of coding. And I think given time, we may expand on what we mean with regard to administrative errors and coding that are so referred to as being fraudulent by, for an example, schemes and their forensic teams.
I mean, that's what I was trying to understand, you see, because your presentation says fraud has reached unacceptable levels. I put to your representative, he says, no, in the optometry, we have no evidence. Now, you are also saying, actually, most of the time, it's administrative errors that are then classified as fraud. That's what I was trying to understand. What is the basis for your claim that fraud has reached unacceptable levels? But I think you've answered it. You say you've got no independent information. You are relying on the general figure by PHF that says 22 billion rands every year goes into fraud.
No, thank you, Chairperson. Insofar as the TORs of this investigative panel bordering as well around the issues of race, and as you would have noticed with our submission, that as an association, we do not necessarily have a racial breakdown or track of our members. And as submitted, our issue in terms of race has been that we accompany our members whenever they are given letters of this so-called meeting without prejudice by the schemes. So some of them would contact us to say, could you please accompany us? And we go with them there so that we want to make sure that their rights are fully reserved and protected. And in that particular view, and as in line with the TORs of this particular investigative panel, we can confirm that in the past years and recent times, an overwhelming majority of those that come to us and we accompany are actually blacks and Indians. We are not having established reasons why that particular trend is there. But we can confirm that those that we do accompany to schemes in the main are your blacks and Indians and colored practitioners.
Can you just tell me again, you see, this thing where you say in 2019,
yes,
you accompanied 8 practitioners to schemes who were subjected to Section 59 investigations, and all of them were black. Can you see that? At page 3, or the 3rd page, because these pages are not numbered.
yes, page
3. Actually, if you look at the wording, we said mostly. So you're quite right, we said 8, and we said mostly. So I think the comments
what
made...
does that, that's what I'm trying to understand,
Yeah.
because his presentation is that they were all black. Your letter says that mostly, but I want to understand what the figures are, and we need to know which schemes, which doctors, what the allegations were, what the investigation produced.
Okay. So if I understand your question correctly, we accompanied 8 optometrists to what is often referred to as meetings without prejudice at medical schemes, one of which was a white practitioner. If you want me to elaborate on the type of cases, I'm happy to do so.
Please.
Sure. Okay. So I suppose it's really like a packet of licorice all sorts, because there was no real commonality. The one case, to illustrate a point that we wanted to make a little bit later on anyway, was that the practitioner had put the wrong dates for claiming purposes. So what I mean by that is that she had seen a patient, let's say on the 4th of August. I'm using these dates just to illustrate the point. They're not actual dates. And she claimed maybe on the 6th of August. The claims indicated the consultation took place on the 6th of August. The medical scheme or the forensic unit of the scheme concerned had regarded that as fraudulent. The scheme hadn't lost anything, the practitioner hadn't gained anything, and the patient had benefited as she or he would have anyway.
Which scheme is that, Mr. Rosen?
Med scheme. Section administrator. Then there was the case of a practitioner who was visited by 2 probes. I think the term probe is well understood. If I don't think I need to elaborate on what meant by probes, am I correct? So 2 probes had visited this particular practitioner. They went undercover and had enticed the practitioner to, well, when I say enticed, I think let me just change my terminology and say they had gone in with the intent of getting the practitioner to put through sunglasses as some. Bottom line is that the particular practice had a promotion on at the time, a free pair of sunglasses with every pair of spectacles. And in this particular case, one of the probes had said that she had a grandson who had visual impairment, and they had an agreement that the probe would bring grandchild back to the practice. Under those circumstances, the practitioner had allowed a free pair of sunglasses. Unfortunately, the probe, when she had put forward her affidavit, had indicated that the practitioner actually had committed fraud. In our view, for what it's worth, I mean, you're not asking for an opinion, you want facts, but I'm just going to add that in now. It was probably a very unfair allegation under the circumstance. Do you want me to continue? No.
Yes, I mean, it would be helpful if we understand what the nature of the allegations were and what scheme was involved.
Sure. So the last was Discovery Health. In both those cases, the allegations were of a fraudulent nature. There was a...
So it was Discovery that sent in the probes?
Yes, there were 2 probes. In fact, to be blunt, if I may, for the purpose of this inquiry, any reference to probes was restricted to Discovery. We weren't involved in any other... we weren't involved with any other scheme or administrator that had made use of what's referred to as probes or undercover agents, for want of a better term.
In relation to this case, can you just explain to us why you thought it was unfair? Obviously, Discovery will give their views on why they thought it was a fair allegation. Why did you think it was unfair?
Well, based on the evidences made available to us, including the record cards, you know, the practitioner hadn't had bowed to the wishes of the probes. The probes had said they want sunglasses. The practitioner had said that they don't involve themselves with that kind of conduct, and that was made very clear to the probes. And what I mean by that they will not make available sunglasses to be put through as a professional service for claiming purposes. What did happen subsequently is that the probes had agreed to undergo an eye exam, each of them, which they did. Both of them were in need of spectacles. And in fact, what happened is the probes actually walked out. He had tried to pursue them based on the story I told about the grandchild, but they were of the view that their mission had been accomplished, that they'd received sunglasses and that he was going to put through those sunglasses a claim. The evidence is available, in our view, for what it's worth, did not substantiate the allegation of fraud. What Discovery did do, despite the evidences made available to them, the discussions that took place, they cut off all direct payment. We would like to, obviously, as we go along during the course of this investigation, we are going to address some of these issues. Indirect payment is a form of punitive action, you know, especially if a precedent had already been established where the practitioner had enjoyed direct payment until that point.
Was this interaction videoed or recorded in any way?
No, it wasn't. But there are notes. There are notes of the meeting.
Notes of the.
Yes.
Of
In other words,
meeting?
there were minutes taken of the proceedings, and those are available.
But was the incident regarding the probes? Did the probes secretly record?
Apologies, yes. We were led to believe that it was, but we were also led to believe that it was of such a poor nature that it couldn't have been used.
Did the practitioner see the recording?
No.
When you say we were led to believe, because that's very vague, you see. What do you actually mean?
So if I can be more specific, the evidence is put forward to Discovery and ourselves clearly demonstrated that the practitioner did not go out of his way, did not institute any form of fraudulent action at that point in time. I think the interaction between the probes and this particular practitioner had other dimensions to it, including an affidavit signed by one of the probes, which we felt was not true. Then some of the other cases had to do with frame markups, also part of our presentation. All of a sudden, out of the blue, one morning, it appears somebody in MedScheme woke up and decided that a 65% markup on frames, that really is the threshold beyond which practitioners can't charge. So what happened there was that, to cut it short, is that MedScheme unilaterally decided, without any policy document, without any consultation, and so forth, unilaterally decided that they were going to deduct the difference between the actual charge and the 65% markup from the claim. And this particular practice, we've been subsequent from discovery point of view, they appear to have fallen in line with a similar type approach, where they also have felt that the markups are unacceptably high. In fairness to discovery, I don't think they're quite sure what they regard as a reasonable markup or not. And to put it into perspective from a practical point of view, to have a markup, a percentage markup as a threshold or as a guideline, well, not a guideline, as a criteria, is almost ridiculous, because as an example, if you buy a pencil for 1 cent, and you sell it for 2 cents, that's 100% markup. So there are many factors that are involved in the costing of frame. So there were 2 or 3 cases where practitioners were asked to attend. question that was originally asked by Advocate Williams was, can we give a breakdown of our membership? So we responded accordingly.
She wants both of them.
Yeah.
She wants the breakdown of the membership
Okay.
and the breakdown of those subjected to Section 59 investigation.
So I think we responded to the first part of Section A of question 1. Section B of question 1, we will do our very best.
Perhaps what we can do is we can send
Yes.
you a follow-up letter and you can give it some thought.
Thank you.
All right, let's carry on, Mr. Dollars.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. So, yeah, in short, and thank you for your questions, that in terms of the TORs, in particular to issues of racial profiling, that is what we can submit, and as per our written submission. We would, however, like to also enlighten the esteemed panel about the actual challenges the profession of optometry is facing and has been facing. And as we have said in the opening, that we feel that this panel investigation could not have been better timed. And as you can see on the slide there, as part of the key issues, we had race and ethnicity. Under that, we've got CMS, which coincidentally are hosting us today. And as a profession, we've been consistent among ourselves and even externally that some of the major fundamental problems that the profession faces are actually housed in this particular building. We can go as far as the sources of our problems could be solved in this particular building, but for many years there's not been any forward movement towards even trying to solve those particular issues. We've got a slight breakdown in terms of how the structure in the optometry profession works, where you have an optometrist, and then you'll have Advocate Williams as a patient, and then she will have her own medical aid, which can be administered by an administrator, or which can be administered by the so-called management of some forensic company within that deals with issues of fraud and so forth, which as a structure we are not necessarily having big issues with. However, when we say our problems are housed at this particular building we are today, some years ago, the accreditation committee of the CMS had decided that the managed care aspect of optometry, which is done by the so-called managed care organizations, no longer needed to be accredited because in their view, and I'm sure they are far better informed than us because they deal with those things, in their view, they thought that the managed care organizations that were involved in optometry did not execute clear managed care protocols. And therefore, they took a decision that those guys no longer need to be accredited. In doing that, as we will prove as the days go by, they then created a space in the health sector because the principle of CMS is that anyone who works or who handles monies of members to pay services must be under the radar of the CMS. In this instance, by that decision, they made a process that the people who are in charge of paying optometry benefits are not in the radar of CMS. That decision just justified that. And
Sorry, who are these people who are in charge of paying optometry benefits that are not on?
I'm coming to that. Thanks. So the MCOs, as I said, you've got optometrists, members, schemes, administrators, and MCOs. MCOs, we've got 3 big ones and other few small ones. The 3 big ones is Ppn, Opticlear, and Isoliso. I just want to make clear at the point that when CMS then took a decision that they no longer need to accredit these guys, for many years, I'll start with Ppn, which somehow it's always thought that the association has a problem with that is actually not accurate because we view all networks as the same regardless of what they do. Their differences in our view is just the names. When CMS decided that optometry networks will no longer be accredited, you found instances where PPN, for the past many years, we have said we've got about 2.6 or so practicing optometrists in the country. If for every claim, PPN will take 150 per claim, every patient that you see, it will be taken from your claim as what is referred to as a settlement discount. If we are conservative, the profession is not as busy because there are more numbers in terms of practitioners, but if we are very conservative, Mr. Chairperson, to say that if every practice that was under PPN at that time would see 10 patients a month, which is a very, very conservative number. If you multiply everything, you are looking at an annual settlement discount to the value of just over 50 million rand. That was taken from all optometrists annually. And this happened for a very, very long time, quite many years. It could be 8, 10 years. It's been very long. And then in 2018 December, PPN released a manual that said those 150s are now going to change to percentage. They're going to be made in percentage, which when you quantify it, some of the discounts will go to SIS over 300 rand, double of what was deducted. Furthermore, the manual spoke that about that optometrists in the process of trying to fight this fraud, wastage, and abuse, and so forth. Because you see, when in our profession, we see you, but then we must order your lenses, your frames, and so forth, so that they can then put into a proper spectacle device. In the manual, they also advise that the optical lenses that we put on the frames should be ordered from certain labs. They went to your big established labs that have been there for a long time, and they disregarded your small minus labs that are in the main black-owned. So when they did that, there was an uproar because there was also a payment arrangement that was made with these labs that the PPN as an MCO will pay on behalf of us as optometrists with the labs and settle with us whatever that is remaining. So optometrists stood up and said, no, this is enough. We are not going to stand for this. And they resigned en masse. When they resigned en masse, there were what we could refer to as retaliatory tactics that were used. The 50 million settlement discounts as a conservative amount has been a surprise to us that when we approached the CMS, they were shocked that there were discounts because in their view, capitated contracts between schemes and networks is a financial arrangement of some sort. To say that as a network, I take the risk from you as a scheme, I will make sure that your optometric claims are within this limit. If optometrists claim more than that limit that you've agreed with the scheme, you lose as a network. That's the nature of the business. If optometrists claim lesser, you win. But they did not know that there were 150s that were taken as a side thing, to an extent that even the actual schemes, we have visited BestMed that was shocked when we told them that this is what is happening. PolMed was actually surprised as well. And unfortunately, and I'm happy I saw their name at the register, the Bonitas, we wanted to present the same thing, and they kicked us out of their meeting to say that they are not involved, it's not their issue, it must be a matter between an optometry and the networks. And we had argued that you have appointed these people to take a risk of you. If we are not comfortable with them, who then do we complain at? But again, it comes back to say, our problems are housed here, because all these things, we came back to complain here to say, this is what is happening, and nothing has happened. So I'll go back to the retaliatory tactics. Everybody, a lot of people, almost 500 to 600 optometrists resigned from that particular network to say, no, we are tired, it's enough. Then the network, by virtue of resigning, they pull a clause from their contract to say, for as long as you have not signed with them, they are going to apply an indirect payment to you. So in the main, if you are a member with them until the 31st of January, you resign on the 31st of January. On the 1st of February, they have lost your banking details. You are no longer in their system. Dr. Mabasuye was saying he does not understand this interpretation of Section 59 that I would go consult with Advocate Ngcukaitobi, and he will send an invoice to my insurance in his name, but that invoice will be paid to me. And schemes use Section 59 to say, yeah, we have a right to say that. We don't care whose invoice, whose name is on the invoice. We can pay for the service. So they will then stop paying patients, stop paying providers, and start paying patients because providers have all resigned. Now, there were practical issues and problems that were then introduced into this particular system because firstly...
Sorry, can you just explain this? I mean, it is the first time I have heard from reading your submission that by removing your name from the network, that can result in indirect payment. So where is this happening? What is the evidence?
That's why, Mr. Chairperson, we are saying our problems are rooted at this particular building. This dossier has been submitted in February to this particular building, and it houses all the complaints. We just wanted to...
Sorry, we only share the building with CMS. But
yeah, no, definitely. We are aware. We are aware.
But Mr. Biloko, importantly, can you also explain to us how this falls within our terms of reference? I mean, that's also important.
It may not necessarily confine itself directly to our terms of reference, but we wanted to broadly show that what are the issues, because you would notice that, as we say, we have submitted this, we have knocked in many doors, and even in our submission, you can see that as much as we try to confine ourselves, and I think even with other previous presenters, found pains to explain other things that were not directly in line with the terms and references of the panel. However, it is still the challenges that, day-to-day challenges that practitioners faces out there. And somewhere, somehow, there is always a glitter of hope that people are looking at to say, who can we cry at? Because those that we have not shown anything. So we are joining that particular bus to say there is cries out there. So when they place you on indirect payment esteemed panel, they will then pay...
Sorry, Mr. Biloko, you've also made allegations against the Council for Medical Schemes, saying the problem is housed there.
Yes.
But you haven't told us yet, or at least I don't understand yet exactly what you mean by that, what the problems are.
All right. Okay, I'm coming there.
Why is the stumbling block for you?
All right.
And also, there's some lack of clarity around Ppn, isolation, and others, what your concern is, whether they are accredited or not accredited, or what your concern is. Because at one point you said there were networks which were not accredited as managed care organizations, and then you indicated that they were. So I also am not following you.
All right. There will be an interchange of the word managed care and network. For us, it's the same thing in terms of how they define themselves.
For us, it's not, because the regulation defines what managed healthcare is and who's required to be accredited. So you do need to be precise around this so we understand you.
Okay. Previously, the managed care, as much as the regulation is clear what is a managed care, the regulation also says that the managed care must be accredited by CMS for it to be a managed care. So in terms of optometry, those accreditation, they said there was no longer a need. I think that will also speak to your question. They said there is no longer a need to accredit them. And therefore, because there was no longer a need to accredit them, it then becomes very difficult to keep referring them to a managed care if they do not...
So there is no longer a need to accredit whom?
The managed care. The managed care players within optometry. The Ppn, the isolated, the Optometry, and the smaller others. So because they were not accredited, these problems that we are saying emanates from, because without accreditation, it means there is no longer proper regulation. There is no longer... Is that all right? So because I just wanted to point on each of the network.
So your submission is they're performing a managed healthcare function,
yes,
and they should be accredited.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely, very clear. Now, The esteemed panel seems to be a little bit older. I've got a young man next to me. He could have joined a medical aid 30, 40 years ago. When he joined the scheme, there's an account number that he will write to say when they want to reimburse him, they can use that account number. In 2019, after en masse resignations, the young man no longer uses that account. Maybe it's 20, 30 years he's not been using it. The scheme, the so-called managed care would pay into his account. That no longer works. So you would find that that normal 30 days period of payment and settlement of claims in practical no longer exists because money has left the managed care into his account and back into the managed care. And the optometrists have not been paid, the patient has not been paid. So, and all of these things is because there is no proper oversight. You go to the other network, ISOLISO. They have something called differential payment that they use, which says if you belong to them, you become their shareholder, you are entitled to higher fees, which we're told that it is allowable. However, we've been raising this issue with CMS to say somebody who's got experience, somebody who specializes in certain line in optometry can be paid lesser by a student who graduates today and opens a practice tomorrow because that student belongs to that particular network, is a shareholder of that particular network. And then you further have OptiClear. All these things happen because there's no oversight. There's a definition of lenses in optometry. Others are more specialized. And more specialized means the person is in need more than your normal average other patient. Desktop design softwares are meant to trace the norms. So those specialized cases where in terms of numbers is fewer people, whenever claims are submitted, you will be requested to motivate because it does not happen a lot. But that is the person who needs assistance. Most have to wait far longer. Furthermore, you have, I think Gary spoke about it a bit well, administrators. We want you to pay us back, and there's nothing you could do. And these other ones are now regulated. But again, Advocate Hassim, when we say we've got problems with CMS, in 2017, June 2017, we lodged a complaint here with CMS about the conduct of MED scheme, where they just woke up and said, yeah, today 60% free markup is sharp. Anyone over, we'll deal with them. Up until today.
Can I perhaps pause you on that? Both yourself and Mr. Rosen have given evidence on this question of the 65% markup of frames. Could you just start by explaining to us basically how the optometry business works? Because certainly in my mind, I understand that you charge for services and there would be codes associated with optometry services. And of course, there's the, you want to call them materials or consumables, whatever they are, the frames. And that would be a form of pass-through costs, but there's a markup. Can you just explain how you bill for those two things and how you determine the prices for those two things in order to be reimbursed? I think that's a good starting point.
Thank you. So, as you put it, we have services and materials that we bill for. So we have a comprehensive set of codes that we designed that are used to bill for the procedures that we actually perform. And those, a tariff will be set by an independent, a tariff guideline is set by an independent person that we may not have a relationship with due to the ruling of competition that we shall not engage in that activity of setting out tariffs. That's the first. The second would be on materials, lenses, low vision devices, prosthetics, contact lenses, and so forth. The same process takes place where these tariffs are set outside of our of our control, and are circulated with schemes. You'll appreciate that schemes also have their own set of requirements, and they would, to a large degree, make out their own tariffs. With regard to frames, of course, there would be limits to what is payable and what's not payable from the third-party funder perspective. When a practitioner procures a frame from a supplier or wherever they get it, they will then put up an exit price, looking into a number of variables that I think Eri spoke to a little bit about that. Then the price is set. So a combination of the three then makes up a bill if then the patient requires of optical device to be made available.
So what regulates the cost of frames?
No one regulates the cost of frames because the Optometric Association, as it is at this point, is prohibited from setting a guideline.
So is it fair to say that the schemes, through their benefit options, determine what proportion of a frame is paid for?
They would recommend what they are willing to pay as a limit, as a ceiling. But what we have a problem with is the fact that the schemes would therefore say this frame procured at X amount, you only allowed to put so much percentage in markup to come to an exit price that we are comfortable with as a third-party funder.
So what I'm trying to understand is if the benefit options are the way to regulate, well, not regulate, but are the way to manage costs associated with frames in this business from a scheme's perspective, how is it becoming a Section 59 issue?
Correct. It becomes that because after you have built whatever you have built, you are then called back to say, in terms of Section 59, we are clawing back.
So you're saying despite the benefit option making the benefit available at the rate at which the claim was submitted, there's a subsequent clawback?
Correct.
And if you can go to your own submission, I think that's where you deal with the, I can't tell you the page because you didn't number your submission, but under the heading of frame markup determination by schemes and administrators, and then the following page, you summarize them in 5 bullet points. And the last one is the Section 59 concern, which is the deductions. Is that correct? Is that correct?
Correct.
Want to expand, Mr. Ross?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I think Advocate Williams had asked a pretty direct question towards the latter part of the discussion, saying that there was a subsequent clawback. You see, as Audience Maluleke had articulately put forward, that there was a benefit structure in place which basically restricted the level of the price. So whether it was 1,000 Rand, 600 Rand, whatever it was, nobody has an argument with that because that's what the schemes do and that's accepted. The principle's accepted. The problem that we've highlighted actually is multifactorial. The first of them is the fact that the medical schemes administrators concerned unilaterally took a decision without any notice prior to their intervention. There was no policy discussion, there was no adoption or endorsement in terms of benefit design by the CMS. And I was a little bit sarcastic without apology a little bit early on, that somebody someday decided all of a sudden that 60% or 65% is the markup. None of the practitioners were aware of it. And that on its own is very unfair practice, to such a degree that some practitioners have been compromised significantly by having a clawback or putting payments on hold. most importantly was the example that I gave you, where they deducted 45,000 rand from the one practice. So it's not just simply the principle, because I take your point, Advocate Williams, you're speaking about a benefit design and some form of regulation for the medicals. We understand that. So it's not just the principle of the markup, it was the way that it was implemented and the way that it was, the intervention that was instituted without any prior warning, without any policy document, without any consultation. And practices
where there is a dispute about the markup, at that point, the scheme would suspend payment until that's resolved, and then sometimes they would deduct.
With due respect, Chair, markup has never been an issue that's been raised in any negotiation, certainly, as you said, I'm a young man in my time. I've never ever known any negotiation that has anything to do with markup at any time. So this was a new intervention that was suddenly introduced without warning. So all the negotiations in the old days would be prior to, as Audience Maluleki had suggested, or had stated, the competition laws have a major impact on the pricing, just generally speaking. So prior to that, markup has never been negotiated. It's the actual price. So markup is never, yeah.
No, what I'm trying to understand is, my colleague, Ms. Williams, asked the question around how does this become a Section 59 issue. I understand at the end, in relation to clawbacks, it is a Section 59 issue.
Yes, sir.
But I'm asking whether or not during the process, where there is a dispute between the practitioner and the scheme about the markup, what is the conduct of the scheme? Do they put a person on indirect payment or not?
Yeah, you are put on hold. You are put on hold. You are,
So just to be clear on this, so if you have marked up a pair of frames greater than 65%, you put on hold?
That's what happened. And that was a complaint that was lodged in July 2017. There's been an acknowledgement to say thank you so much for your complaint, and that was the only form of communication that's taken place. And hence, Mr. Baluka's comments, Advocate Hassim, regarding the building, understand the relationship.
We do have to register that we always make follow-ups with regard to the complaints that we actually send to CMS. Hence the expression that we think that our problems are not far from where we are.
Do you want to proceed with your presentation?
Yes, yes. I just said, I think, 2-3 more lines to go. I think, in a way as well, it answers the question, Advocate, you just asked, Mr. Chairperson. Whenever a practitioner is written a letter as an invitation, whether an audit or this meeting without prejudice, you are automatically presumed guilty until you prove yourself otherwise. And indirect payments, or at other times, withholdment of claims that you have already serviced patients for, and people have collected their spectacles and so forth, and they've left, others maybe they've left the country and so forth. You will not be paid until you prove that you are innocent. So the principle, the legal principle of the Republic of innocent until proven otherwise is practiced in reverse when people are audited and so forth. I think on the last item on my presentation is an issue that as well went to the networks that I see I just omitted. When back to the Ppn network, when everybody resigned, you would come to consult in my rooms at the time that I confirm your benefits, and SMS will come. I think it was the president of the HPSA who spoke about the issue. An SMS will come to a patient to say that, oh, by the way, where you're about to consult, you must know that person is an out-of-network provider. You can go elsewhere. Here's a list, and you'll be paid. Your benefits have got 50% or 43% or whatever greater percentage on the other side. And you'll be lucky for a patient to stick around if it's a new patient. And those that have been with you will still pose questions in terms of this for the past 10, 15 years has never happened. Why is it happening now? But again, the complication becomes that the risk for me as an out-of-network is that a patient can walk out. But as well, the risk for him as an in-network is that his name is on the list of those that are in the network. And in terms of the HPA and the ethical rules, canvassing and touting is prohibited. So he's been canvassed for and touted for without even giving a head that do that against my colleagues. So we are compromised everywhere, and hence we say, as I close and hand over to her, that a lot of these things, as much as some may not fall directly into the Section 59, is frustrations that for many years practitioners have been going through. So thank you, and we will go on with other legislative issues.
Thank you, Chair.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. We felt it was really important to highlight a number of principles to illustrate the environment and the context in which our allegations and our concerns have been raised. The first point that we felt was of great significance is the relationship between the practitioner, the medical schemes, the networks, the administrators, and so forth. And as you can see on the screen, we've just simply termed it a power asymmetry. There's just simply no contest. And I'll give you an example. If an optometrist has a practice which is predominantly has Benitez patients, and Benitez entered into a contract with a particular network, the optometrist concerned has no choice but to enter into a contract with that, either the network or the medical scheme concerned. And there are two reasons for that. The first is for the fear of losing patients, and of course linked to that, the fear of loss of income. I mean, we had a phone call from an optometrist who'd been in practice for many years, who was situated in a city surrounded by banking institutions. 90% of her practice were bank-med patients. They were employees of the banks, and therefore they were bank-med patients. BankMed had entered into a contract with one of the, as Dollars had referred to, as a network or a managed care organization, and she was faced with a dilemma. If she entered into a contract with this particular network, she couldn't sustain the practice. And if she didn't, she had the risk of losing patients. So it's all very well, as we'll come to a little bit later on, for the medical schemes to suggest or even indicate that when practitioners enter contracts, they say that these practitioners are adult people who had entered knowingly into signing certain of these contracts. The point we wanted to make to you is that it's not as simple as that. That they are really, the practitioners are forced into a situation where they have no choice, purely to survive. So that's the first principle we wanted to draw to your attention. The second point is that, you refer to Section 59. The problem that we have is that the medical schemes and the forensic units wear a number of hats, all at the same time. They assume the role of police officer, prosecutor, and judge. And I think in any reasonable society, any in the world, that it cannot be an acceptable principle. So the practitioners go to these meetings without prejudice, based on the request from the medical schemes. And they are listened to, and judgments are taken, and they have to then adapt accordingly. Many of those practitioners, and to be a bit repetitive, we've accompanied many, sign acknowledgements of debt because they can't see a way out of it. And just to put that in perspective, if in many cases the payments have been withheld, or there's indirect payment. So many practitioners can't survive because of that type of intervention, which is punitive. If they don't sign an acknowledgement of debt, they've then got to wait for the case to be heard by the HPCSA as an example, or for other sort of protocols to be considered. They've got families to feed. So the principle of what we're trying to raise here, the asymmetry of power, and the fact that the medical schemes and their forensic counterparts, some of them are part of the organization, some are outsourced, assume those roles. And we'd like to really raise that, and draw that to your attention, because we believe it's pivotal to the allegations and the concerns that we raise. I think Mr. Beluka has covered a lot of ground regarding medical schemes. So I'm going to go through these next few slides quite quickly. We've addressed the issue of the managed care organisations. I'll just pause here and again with your permission, Chair, if that's okay. I simply want to make the point, if you have a look, and who am I asking you to look at a slide that you know well, the role of the medical scheme, so no disrespect intended. The reason why we've got that slide on the screen as it is that the role of the medical scheme appears to be quite well defined within the Medical Schemes Act. And in our view, some of these medical schemes and their forensic units go way outside those boundaries. Because in simple terms, there's a relationship, and Mr. Beluka had referred to it in a much more, well, what's happening there is a little bit more complicated than it should be. You have the patient, the practitioner, and the medical scheme. And the medical scheme really should just honour the obligations of the patient for services received. So in our view, they've gone way beyond that in times. The Council for Medical Schemes has come up, and I know Advocate Hassim has raised the issue and asked the question about the role of the CMS from our point of view and our concerns. I can tell you, and we can supply the information to you, we have ourselves as an association lodged 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 complaints since 2017. None of them have been accommodated. There have been patients who've been, there's one in particular who in 2016 already had been audited by GEMS. I think the total amount, I'll stand for correction, was 750 Rand. Payment was put on hold. She was suspended, actually, from the network, and she's never, ever been told why. So
We need to get some detail about this, because the imputation that since 2016 you've been raising complaints to CMS, and none of them were attended to, may appear to be unfair to CMS unless you give us some detail to work with. Yes. What exactly are you, what did you complain when? 2016 is a long time for CMS to do nothing about the complaints.
So in 2016, I think just in terms of being fair to the practitioners concerned, we're happy to furnish you with the names. I wouldn't like to do it on a public platform like this. But in the one in 2016 had to do with the practitioner that I referred to, was investigated. Momentum was involved. It was GEMS patients. I think the total amount was 750 Rand. They suspended her from the network, and she's never, ever been given the reasons why. So complaints were lodged. We supported her. I personally met with the legal department in this very building downstairs. We were given a reference number, which we'll furnish to you with pleasure. Well, maybe I should delete with pleasure. We will furnish to you. Mr. Beluka also referred to a complaint that we lodged against GEMS around about June 2017 regarding coding. That's never been addressed. In this very year, 2019, we lodged 2 complaints in May, one against Benitas and the other against Bestmed. We've never even received an acknowledgement of receipt. So, Chair, I think that just indicates some of the frustrations that we're sharing with you on this platform today.
Just tell me, so just to take about the 2016 complaint, so you've got a member who was investigated for what appears to be a paltry sum of 750 rands.
Yes.
He's then suspended from the network.
Yes.
A complaint is lodged by the CMS.
To the CMS.
Yes, sorry, to the CMS by your association.
Yes.
Up until now, nothing has happened.
Nothing.
And all you got was an acknowledgement of the complaint and a reference number.
Yes. We will make that information available to you.
And have you followed up with the CMS, to ask why are you not attending to this? It's your statutory job to do it.
Yes. So, as Mr. Beluka had indicated, we do follow up to the best of our ability on a fairly regular basis. But if I may repeat, I personally came to the CMS, met with a member of the legal department, and had assured me that it would be elevated to a certain degree. So that assurance lasted a few minutes. It did not happen.
I do not understand how it can be that a dispute around 750 Rand has resulted in.
Advocate Williams, to tell you the truth, we share your sentiments, and hence we're raising it.
I mean, I suppose the point is there something else that we are not being told in the story? That because it just sounds, mind-boggling, to use a phrase.
I can only repeat, Chair, that your choice of terminology is shared by ourselves, and if I may repeat, that's why we thought it was important to bring it to your attention. And I have to go back. The practitioner concerned in some of these cases, face financial ruin. It's not a joke, and that's why we were so keen to have this opportunity to raise some of these issues. The dossier on my left is a comprehensive one, which incorporates a lot of what we've been telling you today, and these issues have not been resolved. Even, if I may say so, even if there was another part of the story that not been told, the mere fact that the complaint wasn't addressed the way that it should have. As Mr. Baluka had said earlier on, our role really is to ensure that the rights of our members are respected. That's all. If somebody's done something wrong, so be it. But they have the right of reply. They have the right to know why they've done, why certain things have been. They face financial ruin because of something that's alleged that has been done. In this case, the practitioner concerned has not been informed. As I said, I'm going to race through some of these because I think they've been comprehensively addressed. Just to make the point again that the designated service providers with optometry, we do refer to them as networks. So they are synonyms of each other, preferred providers or managed care organizations. Just to make the point, the Health Professions Council supports the concept. There are certain criteria that there should be no exclusivity, and that the criteria should be based on their qualification. There were two aspects of the Medical Schemes Act that we felt was important that you, as advocates, you would know well, that the group of providers who are selected to perform certain services should be accredited, and for those organizations that provide managed care services are also are expected to be accredited. And I think that's been addressed. And in the instance within optometry, none of the optometric networks are accredited. So I'm going to skip most of these because we've done it, And this is simply just as an example where a complaint was lodged against one particular network, and the response from the clinical analyst of managed care organizations or the CMS simply gave reference to the one particular network, saying this particular network is not an accredited managed care organization, and it's also applicable to the others that Mr. Baluka has mentioned. What's of concern to us, despite the fact that we've raised what we believe are to be violations of certain aspects of the law or activities or actions that we regard as ethically undesirable, the medical schemes who have appointed the designated service providers, who are not accredited, have abdicated from all responsibility. And this is an example. So we mentioned two cases where we actually instituted complaints, once against Benitez, the other against BestMed. And if I may repeat, there was no response from the Council for Medical Schemes, simply saying BestMed can unfortunately not get involved beyond this point, and you take it further with their DSP. This is a reference from Section 57 of the Medical Schemes Act. So from our point of view, there is a breach of the law. The Council for Medical Schemes appear to be fairly impotent, in terms of the way that they address this, and hence, again, one of the reasons why we've raised it in this particular forum. We felt that the Board of Trustees of the Medical Schemes have a responsibility to ensure that their operations and administration, as per the Medical Schemes Act, to ensure that that all of that is adhered to, in terms of the legislation, and hence bring it to your attention. Just as a matter of interest, it was 2013, It was 24th of March 2013, the Health Professions Council had sent out a notice to practitioners across the board, to all registered healthcare practitioners. And the heading of that particular document was concerns over the exploitation of healthcare practitioners. And in that document, they also refer to Section 59, and it made the point that if there are contracts where the practitioners feel that they are enticed or forced to enter which are ethically undesirable, they should then make this known to the Health Professions Council. So I'm only raising this, and we're only raising this to let you know it's not simply that that the Health Professions Council and other regulatory authorities haven't been alerted to some of the actions and some of the injustices that have taken place. They have been. Yeah, just as a matter of interest, we felt is also of some relevance. In terms of the intent of the medical scheme, that really we can't sort of qualify in any way, but it's just interesting to note that when practitioners are audited, and Mr. Baluka had referred to random audits in particular, they receive a letter that simply says, there's a paragraph or so that introduces the medical scheme and their responsibilities, and that's followed by a paragraph that says, you have been selected to participate in our random audit program. It's almost like giving you a medal to say congratulations.
Mr. Rosen, can I just ask you a question there? Because
Sure.
this is the
Sure.
first time we're hearing evidence in relation to random audits. The evidence we've heard so far suggests that practices are flagged because they're an outlier and then they're subject to a form of audit and investigation. So which schemes or administrators are conducting random audits?
Yeah. So this type of terminology is directly extracted from correspondence sent, and so that's Discovery and MedScheme. We can't speak on their behalf. We're only really referring the matter to you and bringing it to your attention. But the manner in which it's done, is also problematic from our point of view. To simply say, congratulations, you're now part of our random audit. And then 2 or 3 paragraphs later, there's a paragraph that says, we trust we can resolve this matter within 7 days. So I don't think I need to say more.
Chair, may I add that in addition to the 2, PPN also engages in random audits.
I think one of the reasons that's sometimes given linked to the reference to a random audit is they refer to the practitioners as outliers. It's an unfortunate term because not everybody understands what an outlier is, and does cause some apprehension for those who receive such a letter. But the bottom line, they are random audits, and the terminology is directly extracted, as I said.
I think if they are accompanied by that allegation, it seems that they're not random audits in the way we would understand it. They're driven by the practitioner being an outlier, so perhaps that clarifies the matter.
In those circumstances, yes, but not in all circumstances.
So you're saying they're a group where you are randomly audited because you're flagged as an outlier, and there's a group where you're just randomly audited?
That appears to be the case, yes. Yeah, we just wanted to make mention briefly, but not to dilute the importance of this issue of access to record cards. There appears to be some contradiction from time to time in terms of legislation instituted by the various regulatory bodies.
Sorry, Mr. Rosen, before you move on then,
Yes, sorry.
What is your submission in relation to the random audits, besides the fact that the way in which it's notified is, in your view, not completely appropriate? What are your further submissions in relation to the random audits?
No, I really thank you for asking that question. From our point of view, we regard such an audit as a fishing expedition.
As a result, we actually do not have problems with mechanisms of trying to safeguard the members' benefits and so forth. If there is reason to believe that a specific a claim that has been made is not appropriate. We've got no reason to object to targeted audit as it in the morning going for fishing edition.
It's not really practical that before these payments are made, we can go through each and every claim in minute detail and discover whether or not claims are fraudulent or not. The only time this realistically can be done is post the payment, right? And even when we do it post the payment, we can't inspect each and every claim from each and every practitioner. And we have to use a sampling methodology because that's the most practical methodology. So I hear that, the practitioners are complaining about that. But if you just put yourself in the shoes of the schemes, where they have a primary responsibility to members and protecting them against the perceived fraud. Let's forget about waste and abuse for the moment, but let's talk about acts of deliberate fraud. What exactly do you expect the schemes to do?
Okay. I think there's one word I think that may answer your question to a degree, and we expect everybody to act reasonably. And what I mean by that, if there's evidence that comes to light, as Mr. Maluleke has put, that indicates something is not quite right, then of course one can go about that. Because even if you go outside the world of healthcare, and there are different payment mechanisms and things, you don't get the police knocking at your door every morning just to see whether you've stolen anything. The bottom line is that practitioners, the vast majority in our view, really work very hard. They render professional services to the benefit of the public. They are compromised right from the very beginning, as we said early on, in terms of the power asymmetry. The medical schemes dictate the price, and we understand that they have those rights. Then on top of it, they've got to contend with these interventions, some of which are not justified. So it's not just a matter of the audits. I repeat, Mr. Maluleke, I think it expressed it well. We have no problem with that. But part of it, as an example, they withhold payment. So I gave you the example of the frame that was, the frames that were purchased in Dubai. Where they didn't see the dollar sign, they saw the rand sign, and they put the practitioner on hold. He was overseas. I've left out a lot of detail. So he had locums working his practice, and his practice was put on hold for 2 weeks, whatever it was. That's not right. Yes. So the point I wanted to make about the record cards, and I was speaking about what appears to be contradictions sometimes, and I suppose one could say that there are ways and means of dealing with it, but it is confusing from the practitioner.
Sorry, Mr. Rosen, before you move on,
Yeah, sure.
I'm just not finished understanding this your answer,
All right.
that everyone must act reasonably, because the schemes would argue that it's perfectly reasonable if your practice is flagged as an outlier to investigate further. And I can't see actually an issue with that.
Well, I think we've addressed that part to say if there's evidences to suggest that there's something that needs to be done, as you correctly said, there were two groups. One where the word outlier forms part of the correspondence, and there's another group that doesn't. So
That's fine. Then let's speak about the group where there's no flagging and it's just purely a random audit. I think we must get some detail on that, who the schemes are, administrators that do this, and how it works.
All right. So I think for the purpose now, I'll give you one or two examples. So some of the contracts with the designated service provider example, and I'm going back to what we said early on about the power asymmetry, so I'll leave that for now, but I just wanted to raise it again. So some of the contracts give the officers of those particular entities the right to enter into practices during working hours to have access to record cards. So that was an example of, and I can tell you that, I mean, just one of the entities was Ppn that was referred to that had done this. Whether they've stopped it or not, it's still a facet that we need.
Ppn is obviously difficult for us because they're neither a scheme or an administrator, as I understand it.
Well, that's the reason why we're raising this to your attention. They operate, they act on behalf of a medical scheme who's appointed them. They provide managed care services.
So your submission is, in fact, they are bonitas in disguise.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I must tell you, not
No,
so much.
not to
Yes.
as I said, be disrespectful or add humour to this, but
Yes.
but seriously, what is the submission? Is it that they are bonitas? They're acting on behalf of bonitas?
Because they're not accredited, absolutely. They're acting, they are. I wouldn't say in disguise, though, because we all know who they're representing. All right. May I, Chair?
Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you.
I mean, I don't know if you finished your answer on unpacking the concept of acting reasonably, what that might entail.
Okay, so maybe just to clarify a little bit further, we're simply saying if there are evidences to suggest that a practice is in fact acting outside certain defined boundaries, then we believe that schemes, forensic units, whatever entities involved, has the right to investigate further. Our submission to you is that there are areas where that doesn't happen. In other words, there doesn't appear to be anything reasonable.
I mean, I take your point about the suspension prior to the conclusion of the investigation, that might appear disproportionate to the practitioner.
Correct.
But there is a counter-argument to that if there is an instance of suspected fraud, it's putting the members' contributions at risk to continue paying that practitioner. And so you must stop as soon as possible.
Well, I would suggest there may be preferable interventions. Sometimes the practitioners aren't even aware that their practice has either been suspended or their payments have been put on hold. So there should be mechanisms or policies in place. Many of these schemes don't even have policies. I've already mentioned the markup. Where does that come from? So I mean, Mr. Maleke mentioned early on when you were interrogating the term fraud and the incidence of fraud, we basically refer to certain administrative anomalies, like coding anomalies. So one's got to, when I say reasonable, one's got to identify the issue, get the information, then act accordingly. It's very unfair if there's a coding anomaly, and maybe one could argue, well, the scheme wouldn't know until they've met. But it goes back to the slide I had early on police officer, prosecutor, and judge. You know, some of these things in isolation, I think one could argue, but if you look at the package in the context of the allegations that we've made and the concerns that we've raised, those are the reasons why we've raised them.
And my last question on the random audits. Could you just explain to us how Ppn is conducting these random audits so we have further information on that?
Sure. So I already mentioned whether it's been stopped or not. I'm just taking a step back. We've raised it, and if it wasn't for certain interventions, it would continue. But the one example would be based on a contractual clause that officers of this particular entity would have access to the record cards during working hours. So they would enter a practice, and they would then have access to the cards, and they would ask for a number, 20 or 30 cards, whatever it may be, just to see that everything seems to be okay. So that would be a good example of a random audit.
I think before you go on here, maybe just to add on the reasonability, practitioners versus schemes, and the point you are making, it's quite very reasonable to say, would the scheme not be risking members' fees if they keep on paying somebody that flagged? But I think as well, an aspect that to be defined as an outliner, if you see more patients than those are around you, you will still be regarded as an outlier. So you may be punished for being busy. And if we say that the reasonability from the medical scheme is that once they suspect that there's a problem here, let us stop payment, then that person who's servicing more patients, who's doing more good, is at the risk of not being paid, if that is the reasonable to look at. So that is why for us, and our role is to always look at the reasonability, but in the main, we are always biased towards the practitioners because we are the voices of the practitioners. So we are always advocating for systems that will be fair, and I think it's reasonable. It will be fair and reasonable to say that if I am very busy, I am not compromised for being very busy, and be told that your claims are this high compared to audience who perhaps is not even doing contact lenses. And why do you do so many contact lenses? And therefore, we'll put you on hold until we find out why do you do contact lenses. And the onus is on me to leave everything that I do, come to the scheme to say, I'm doing contact lenses, I am better in contact lenses, I specialize at contact lenses. And even if you say that, you must still provide further proof that you do those things. So being good can ultimately be bad for you in a way.
Well, you will become an outlier, won't you?
So if I could just go back to the discussion about the fairness and reasonableness of the process and the submission that you make as an association that being placed on indirect payment means that practitioners face financial ruin. Why do you make that submission when it doesn't mean, being placed on indirect payment does not mean that you will not get paid? It simply means that the member will be paid and will need to pay the practitioner, rather than the scheme directly paying the practitioner. It isn't a case where you no longer get paid for a service that is provided.
Okay. I think if I may just make a brief comment and then Mr. Beluka would elaborate a bit. I think on paper what you say is correct, that the medical scheme chooses to pay the patient. But there are many situations, many circumstances where the practitioner doesn't get paid. So I'm talking about the indirect situation. But I think that Mr. Beluka, if you don't mind.
And yeah, because I think it's indirect payment and withholding, but in particular to indirect payment. I'd give an example of the young man having joined the scheme a long time ago. If they pay into an account that no longer exists, for an example, when we see patients for this month of August, our business is running on August. It is dependent on us that our overheads will be paid by the business that we do in the month of August. And if you are to be comfortable and say perhaps we might expect payment month end of September if we consider the 30-day principle and so forth. But by the mere fact that payments, as much as schemes say, yes, within 17 days we have paid into Advocate Hassim's account, which no longer exists. By the way, they've got my account because they've been paying me directly previously. So they pay into Advocate Hassim. Because the reconciliation on ever takes long, it should, they might pick up, if they pick up ever, after 2 months that the money had gone back to them. Or then it becomes the responsibility of the practice or the patient to follow up, which most often than not falls way over the 30 days. So an indirect payment has got more direct line to practitioners not being paid or not being paid on time. There is a lot more. If you are paid, you're going to be paid late. But most often than not, most of us are not paid if we are on indirect payment.
Also, to add to that, and I think the point has been made here before by some of the the other presenters previously, that it also depends on who is your patient. For an example, because if you are practicing in a place where you are servicing your high LSM patients, that does not become an issue. But if you are servicing your GEMS, your Optometric patients with no disrespect to our patients in those medical aids, you'll understand that the socioeconomic situations are different And the majority of these patients that we're actually servicing barely have anything left by the 16th of the month, by the 16th day of the month, to actually cover for every other of their liabilities. That once money goes into their account, they don't know that money is going to come into their account. They'll use it. And that the onus rests on me to be a debt collector. I'm only a practitioner trying to do my work. And that actually, again, makes the relationship, however old or however long that relationship has been with the patient, a little bit awkward, that I will be calling on them that I need my money. And I need my money. And because obviously as a practitioner, I have my day set to see patients, do what is best for the patients. I'm going to have to channel additional resources, which I don't have to begin with, to get to someone that is qualified to do that collection, to do that. But then again, on the practitioner, trying to do his work.
And I suppose the schemes also know this vulnerability, and that's why it's easy to use this as a pressure point on the investigation. Exactly. Let's put you on indirect. That puts a pressure to cooperate with the investigation. So I mean, there is an upside from the scheme's perspective that we want you to cooperate with the investigation. And what lever do we have other than to put you on indirect payment?
100%. Failure for you to sign an AOD takes away the freedom for you to actually continue to practice. The moment, and I think the point has been made a number of times by other practitioner groups, that the moment you sign an AOD, then everything is hunky-dory. You can continue to practice. And this is exactly why we felt these points needs to be made quite clear.
So the medical schemes will say that it's not, you don't need to sign an AOD if you cooperate with the investigation and the problem is resolved, then the problem goes away. It doesn't need.
No, yes. The cooperation with the investigation is not really the problem, because certainly in our experience and our advice to our members has always been to cooperate. We've never advised anybody not to. The problem is what Audience Maluleke has just said, is when it comes to the OOD. Because if you sign the OOD, then everything is okay. If you don't sign the OOD, then it's not always okay. And what I mean by that, if payments are being withheld, just as an example, and you refuse to sign an AOD, then the medical scheme will say to you, well, that's fine by us, we will continue to withhold it. We can't continue the relationship we had. You need to then find other ways and means. If there's indirect payment, I can tell you, I'm under oath, that I know practitioners who have signed acknowledgements of debt because they were put on indirect payment. They couldn't sustain their practices being on indirect payment. So the cooperation part is not, if I've understood your question correctly, Advocate Hassim, the cooperation has never been problematic. I can't think of one case where there hasn't been cooperation, where information's been asked for and that's been made available. It comes to the point of AOD. The terminology is used, you go your way, we go our way, and that's it. But if you don't, the indirect payment stays, or the withholding of payment stays, or the suspension stays until it's resolved from another point of view.
I think maybe to add, Advocate Hassim, as we have said, once you're called, you are presumed guilty. Once they call you, you are guilty. And therefore, the solution, a cooperation in their definition, is an AOD, that is cooperation.
So you're saying that if you were to present information to the scheme that explains whatever they are concerned about in relation to the billing and would resolve it, that they nevertheless insist on an AOD. So there's no way, in other words, to provide information to satisfy the scheme or the administrator that there isn't any waste, abuse, or fraud in relation to the billing.
Sorry, Advocate, may
Advocate Hassim.
Yes. I think, Yeah, again, if we've understood your question correctly, I think in fairness to the schemes, those cases where I gave you the example early on, where they misread the dollar sign, said it was 30 times the amount of the cost and so forth. It was easily explained and there was no problem. Where it is an issue, where there's a dispute. So I said early on, I know of cases, and I do, where acknowledgements of debts have been signed purely because the practitioners can't afford to be put on the indirect payment route. So he disputed the allegations made by Discovery, and Discovery weren't happy with his explanations.
Just to add, Eri and I have been to Discovery a number of times, at which point it was quite clear that despite the evidence to substantiate the fact that there was no wrongdoing from the part of the practitioner, that the forensics would say this is not possible, that our probe, our trusted probe, would have continued to engage with you on those bases. So from where we sit, cooperation is quite different. It has a different meaning. It has different meaning because we have had practitioners being cooperative, providing information that disproves the fact that there was wrongdoing. But the forensics would continue to say it's not possible that our probe will continue to engage with you on the basis that you are actually putting forward to us.
Thank you. I mean, I think we got the gist of the complaint here, which is that the investigation is not really used as an instrument to establish the facts. It's used as an instrument to put pressure to sign an AOD. Once an AOD is signed, the investigation disappears. I mean, that's your complaint in relation to the AODs.
It's not really, that's the fact.
You say it's not a complaint, it's a fact.
No, sorry, it's a fact.
Yes, I have to record
that's
it
a concern, absolutely.
I have to record it as an allegation. I know that you believe it is a
Yes.
fact. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. You must continue with the rest of your presentation. You have about 15 minutes.
Yes, I know. I think I'm going to stop my side with the exception of one point, is that we understand that there is legislation in place where if there's evidence of fraud or allegations of fraud that exceeds 100,000 Rand, there's an obligation of the parties concerned to report it to authorities. And that's another concern. If the schemes are genuinely of the opinion that fraud has taken place and that the amount exceeds 100,000 Rand, that sort of principle of involving other parties falls away. So from the practitioner's point of view, it's really a line of least resistance to sign these acknowledgements of debt. It doesn't get referred to the HPCSA, it doesn't go to the police, and everybody carries on living as though nothing ever happened. So I think, let me stop.
I mean, we also understand that even on the HPCSA side, the investigations take a long, long time. That a single investigation will go on for years. So that's also another factor that, the schemes, one must take into account that, to refer a practitioner to the HPCSA before you can terminate payment where you suspect fraud simply increases the risk.
Chair, that's a really important point you raised, because I can tell you there are cases, in our view, where we've advised our members not to indulge in further negotiation, correct terminology with the scheme, rather take their chances, go to the Health Professions Council and let their peers then judge accordingly. But based on what you've just said, particularly in those situations where punitive actions already been instituted, such as the withholding of funds or the indirect payment, the practitioners concerned can't afford to wait that long and therefore sign acknowledgements of debt.
Yeah, if I may continue from where he has stopped. Chair, please, I need to indulge you in a video that we have,
In a video?
yes.
Okay, this is going to be interesting.
Chair, please note that there is no audio. This is a CCTV footage of the proceedings. As you can see, 4 gentlemen entering a
Can
practice.
you just start by telling us what exactly, where was this taken? I mean, just authenticate it. Who took it? Where was it taken? What was the date? What was the context? Before you tell us what's going on.
Okay, so this CCTV footage in a practice, and I think the date does reflect there.
I mean, you know, it's very difficult to say this. If somebody can probably just switch off these lights here. I'm struggling to see. Can you see it? Yeah, if you can switch off these lights.
Okay.
Can
Yeah, maybe
authenticate-
in the meantime, we can get to explain the video itself. Eri?
Okay, so this is, as audience had suggested, is a security footage taken in a practice in Secunda on the 13th of February 2019. The practitioner, and I think there were 2 staff members who were in the practice at that point in time. So 4 gentlemen had entered the practice completely unannounced. As you can, if you have a look through the video footage now, you can see 4 of them entering this practice. These 4 gentlemen represent the forensic unit of MedScheme. So I think if I can stop there and for you just to allow you to see what took place and how this investigation was conducted. And I have to say again, if I may, that when I say unannounced, the practitioner had no idea of who these gentlemen were.
Is this the practitioner?
The practitioner, yes, she's now in the front.
Yeah, behind the counter.
Yes, so you can't see that clearly. There's a gentleman directly in front and a gentleman to the left, and there are 2 gentlemen sitting down.
So the point we're trying to highlight here, Chair, is the way in which we are being handled unannounced, without given an opportunity to have representation. And I think at some or other, yeah, somewhere within the video, you can see the body language, you know, which actually is quite intimidative, just to say the least. And I think we have, of this video, we have 2 angles which we have made available for your indulgence. And to...
So these are not probes, these are actual investigators?
Yes, these are investigators.
So what are you showing us, that this is how the investigation is conducted?
Well, in this case, we can say it's how it's conducted. You will appreciate, Chair, that we don't have the insight to all the investigations, but we report on what we actually have been intimately involved in.
Now I'm saying this is how this one was conducted.
Correct.
Do you know what they were investigating? Or at least what they were saying?
Yes. Yeah, the practitioner concern, as we said earlier on, I mean, information that you may need, we'll certainly provide. The practitioner concern was certainly willing to come forward at an appropriate time. But one of the allegations, and I think I mentioned it early on against her, was that she had been fraudulent in her claims because the dates of the consultations didn't correlate And that's, as a matter of interest, on this occasion, MedScheme had wanted, they wanted 300,000 Rand, an acknowledgement of debt for 300,000 Rand. And part of it, as I've said, was because the dates of the consultation didn't correlate. They were just a few, that was dropped to 99,000 Rand. And I can tell you that this practitioner couldn't handle the stress anymore. Audience has, for obvious reasons, has left out a lot and ended up signing an acknowledgement of debt for 99,000 Rand, although she believes that she hadn't really done anything that was deserved.
Which is just 1,000 rands or a few rands below the threshold to invoke the services of law enforcement. It tells you, I think it does tell you something. I mean, I think the point has been made here, Chair, that there might be a need to actually check how many of the people that have been put under investigations have been reported for further investigation by law enforcement agencies as per the provision. Because yeah, you can understand it dropped substantially from over 350,000 rands to 99. It actually now puts a point that says we are interested in clawing back and not necessarily the justice of justice.
Is this taken on the 13th of February 2019?
Yes.
By who?
This is a Cctv footage.
So it's the security firm?
Yeah, in the practice.
In the practice, I see.
Yes. And as I said, there is two angles to this video. The other video is been made available for your further indulgence.
And there is no audio?
Well, it's a Cctv footage, so there is no audio, unfortunately.
All right. Anyway, is there a statement from the practitioner at the very least?
Well, I think Eri has mentioned that the practitioner concerned has given. Yeah, Eri, if you may.
Yes, we have affidavits from the practitioner and her staff.
All right. Well, thank you for the video. Is there another angle you want to show us?
I think the other angle, we're just making it available for you for further indulgence, not to show here. Yeah, are able to move forward. So, as it were, we can confirm that, and I think we have had conversations.
I mean, why are you putting this video under intimidation? Did this practitioner say that she was intimidated? Because it's very difficult to see from the body language that there is intimidation. There are just four men. One of them speaks to her, and the other comes closer. And then she is talking and then using her hands. But, I mean, to look at that video and then to infer intimidation is probably unfair to MedScheme.
Sorry, Chair. I think we would argue for the type of allegation that was put forward, to have four big men enter a practice to address one practitioner, I think is a little bit of overkill, to be blunt, from our side. And to answer your question, yes, she was intimidated based on her evidence.
Would you say it's the same to send four big men into a practice where there's a man proprietor versus a woman proprietor?
Well, I can only speak for myself. I can tell you I would probably feel uncomfortable myself, especially, I think you'd appreciate, especially, it's like when a police officer comes to question you about a crime, not that it's happened to me, I just have to wait. But nevertheless, the principle of somebody showing a badge of authority. You've got four men, senior men, walking into practice with a badge of authority representing a forensic unit of a medical scheme. I can tell you again, based on our experience, I don't know of any case, no matter how serious or how severe the allegations are, the practitioners are not really apprehensive, mouths are dry, don't sleep. It's a very traumatic experience, full stop. So I repeat, in our view, for 4 men, in this case, we believe it's an overkill and, by definition, intimidatory.
So you would say that, regardless of what was said, the entire atmosphere was an intimidating atmosphere, the way that they entered, their posture,
Yes.
and the accusations put to her. Just tell me, was that acknowledgement of debt signed there and then?
No.
It was signed at a later stage?
Yes. We were quite intimately involved in that particular case, and hence we knew about the amounts of money that was involved in this particular case.
Did Medskim want it signed there and then with those 4 men? Was their proposal that we've got an AOD, you can sign it to make the problem go away?
No. That didn't happen, if I understood your question correctly. There were subsequent meetings, there was correspondence.
I'm saying that, apart from the fact that she came to report, I mean, if it was according to Medskim, would they have wanted the AOD signed at that meeting?
No.
I see.
Okay, again, just to illustrate the point, here is intimately involved. When you are in the cubicle, in some of these forensic meetings, it has been in the tables. It has happened. People are intimidated. People are intimidated. That's why we needed to make this point to you, Mr. Chair. And I think this point has been the one on withholding of claims. I think I'm just gonna skip on it, the aspect on cooperation, it comes out as a statement like the one that is displayed, but in actual sense, as we have articulated now, it does not. Cooperation and cooperation is different. The clawbacks on claims that have already been paid. We have examples of instances where a practitioner sees a patient, they are paid. Months after, they are told that they need to pay back. And I will give you an example of a scheme, Fed Health, and a victim chair. It's none other than myself. In this particular instance, where on the 31st of January, is it 2017, 28? Yeah, 2017, 28. I can't remember the year, but we will provide all that. A patient is seen, benefits are confirmed, reference number given. Then we'll see the patient. 7 days or 10 days later, actually 7 days, a claim is paid. In April, then you receive a letter that says, hold on, Mr. Malulek, we need our 495 rands for the examination that you actually did on this member because you were not entitled for it. Because one, the patient has resigned from the medical scheme on the 31st of December. My question would naturally have been, if it was on the 31st of December, the patient came to me another 31 days later, and you gave me an assurance that this member has benefit, this member is covered. Because if I was not given that assurance, I could have acted differently. Could have asked them to pay me there and there. But that did not happen because I was assured. And I think the point that has been made, again, by the chairperson, the president of the HPCA, that we are giving service thinking that we will be reimbursed. And we actually get surprised at the time when we actually need the reimbursements. And I think they quoted very well this particular clause when they were corresponding with me, that we are invoking Section 59. And I would have argued I would have argued that I was entitled to that money because I've provided the service. It is the scheme's administrative error. And I think if you were to read Section 59 with Regulation 6, the onus becomes on them to actually, I may be misinterpreting these things, as you would understand, I'm a practitioner. The onus becomes on them to prove that I was not entitled for that amount, as it were. So that has been the issue. Indirect payment away, we spoke to that a lot. With this, we'll just pass in the interest of time. And I think the guilty until proven innocent has been exhausted, Chair. Yeah, and I think this point was also spoken
Mr. Maluleke, before you move on to this, can I actually just take you back, because I see you changing themes, to a point in your written submission that we haven't properly covered yet. You've previously explained to us how tariff codes are set by an independent body. I have just a couple more questions on that. Where do we find the codes that govern optometry in terms of what procedural codes should be used and the associated tariff? Which manual is applicable?
Okay. We would answer in this manner that the tariff codes for, not tariff codes, the codes for optometry are available in our website. We'll make those available. Because of the fact that we have mentioned here that we're not involved in the tariffs, we do not have a file per se as the association to say this is the tariff that you can apply to this particular code. But it's safe insofar as to say that there is a number of guidelines that are available in the market that are done independently of ourselves. There is a file called Optical Assistant. It's called the Optical Assistant. It's done by a company called SB Media. But some schemes have applied codes, I mean tariffs to our same SAOA codes that we actually speak to. Opticlear is its tariffs, Discovery has its tariffs, and so forth and so forth. That we can make available.
Thank you. And then just to go to your written submission, you say the reference to codes relates to the allegation that medical aid schemes in question are refusing to pay certain tariff codes. Instead, these schemes are said to be advising practitioners to bill using other codes, resulting in a situation where these practitioners are encouraged or forced into committing fraudulent acts. Again, I'm sorry, I can't give you the page number. Optometrists to use codes which you then consider to be codes which are incorrect and therefore are suggesting that you commit a fraudulent act. Can you give us, or confirm that and give us specific examples, please?
Okay. There will be two examples to this. As it were, the codes that we actually have made available are quite comprehensive and specific to a product. So when we say that Advocate Williams has consulted and we are going to prescribe for her a specific multifocal or bifocal lens with specific properties, there is a specific code for that. That is unique for that particular product. So there will be schemes and or administrators that will not want to use the codes that we are referring to that has direct implication into what exactly is the material that you're actually prescribing. At which point you are going to use a category and then a subcategory, which is not specific to the specific material that we are prescribing. Until recently, for an example, GEMS was not using, in particular, the updated code structure that we have in the market. They continue to use the old codes that were ended in 2017 May. As a result, there would have been updates in September 2017, January 2018, May and September. So if and when you use the codes on an updated material, you don't have a code to actually use for that specific material that you have used because it's not on the list. It's not updated. As a result, you're going to use a closest code or a non-specific code, which to us does not necessarily represent the exact, yeah. So what is on the claim is not necessarily what is being provided for.
Thank you. And so I understand this relates all to multifocal lenses and what codes are used for that, or is that it?
All lenses. I just made an example on multifocal. All lens categories.
I just want to be clear, just in relation to the example that you gave me. So I understand it applies to all lenses. There would be updates, and you obviously have to use the updated code in order to be accurate. And medical schemes may, and in this case, GEMS may not have included the updated code in their particular reimbursement models. But just in relation to the specific example, so for multifocus lenses, is it true that there was a code in 2017 that GEMS continued to use, that then you couldn't use an accurate code for in 2018? I'm looking for specifics. That's what I'm getting at. Because we run the risk of being too general and then therefore making factual mistakes.
Because a particular, say, multifocal lens from a particular, let's take a new entrance into the market.
No, Mr. Maluk, answer the question.
Now, I
just want one specific example, and as I understood, you were giving me the specific example in relation to multifocal lenses and the coding in relation to that.
Yes. It means then that the code that we'll use, it's not necessarily the exact code that you would have actually provided, but you would have then had to use a code for any other material. You know, any other material, it's not the material that we're talking about.
No, Mr. Look, let's do this. You've said to us that GEMS was using an outdated code in 2017, which was inconsistent with 2018 claims, and as a consequence, we're refusing to reimburse based on the new codes. Is that true or not?
We can argue it is true.
In relation to what product and code?
Any of the products that were not necessarily on the code listing before the time of the implementation of the new codes.
Would that include multifocal lenses?
All lens categories.
So is your answer yes?
Yes.
Thank you.
You may proceed. Assume that we are aware of the provisions of PRECA. We are aware of the provisions of the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act. Yes. You can assume that, so continue with your presentation.
Yeah, and I think, we have made that point. I think this point on AODs was exhausted as well. SMS. Yeah. The President will continue from here.
Mr. Dollars, is that you?
Sorry, Chair, if I may just make a point.
Or the other President.
A very quick one. Just to go back to the video, I obviously referred to the gender of men. from our point of view, the intimidation was with 4 employees. And I just wanted to make that point, irrespective of it was a mix between male, female only. I just mentioned men. I just wanted to make that point here. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it was quite an important point to make. In actual fact, I am not continuing, Chairperson. I am concluding. We
still have a slide. What is the slide? Advertising, touting, and canvassing.
We did not speak to that. All right. Yes. I covered a little bit on this on the opening about the issue of touting and canvassing, which is a violation of the ethical rule from the HPSA. So in the main, it still speaks about the SMS that a patient will receive at the moment that you sit in my practice. I call the scheme to confirm your benefits. You get an SMS to say that I've got one that fortunately a patient of mine sent while he was seated in my practice. And he's been someone who's been practicing with me, who's been consulting with me for about 4 or 5 years. So he was quite surprised that why is it now that when he's supposed to come and consult with me, an SMS comes in. It was him and the wife. An SMS comes in to say that he's about to consult with an out-of-network provider. Not here, sorry. All right, yeah, it's exactly that, yes. An optical benefit inquiry has been made on your profile by an out-of-network provider. Your frame benefit is 43% more if you visit an in-network provider. Click here to find a provider, and there's a link that is supplied on the message. And the link has got all those in-network providers. So in the main, it means those network providers that are on that link are being touted for and canvassed for. Whether they've agreed to the touting on canvassing is an irrelevant matter if it comes here, but we are quite aware because we've lodged a complaint with the HPCC about this, and they are looking into the matter on that. So, but our point is that as a practitioner, if you're outside, if you're out of the network, you are compromised because your patient will receive those type of messages. If you're in network, you're compromised because our regulator will come after you on that. So in the main, that was the issue on touting and canvassing, and we want to take this opportunity to thank you for affording us. And we do know that some of the issues might not be falling within the TORs, but as we have mentioned, we have got quite tremendous hope in the panel, and we wish you all the best as you continue.
Thank you. Thank you to you, Mr. President, and to your association for the written submission and your oral presentations this morning. We will be sending you further requests for information and some of the items we've been discussing today, especially on the specific instances of the practitioners and the way that they related to the schemes. And of course, we will be looking further into that video incident. But for now, thank you for your presentation. So the inquiry will then adjourn until 1 o'clock when Advocate Ngcukaitobi will be presenting on the legal meaning of racial profiling.